You've probably heard the term juvenile offender thrown around a lot, but what if that label, that single term, is actually hiding more than it reveals? In this explainer, we're going to dig into the real, complex stories behind the statistics and ask a tough question. Can a system built mostly on punishment ever really lead to healing?
Think about that for a second. This one idea completely challenges how we usually think about juvenile justice. It suggests that for a lot of these young people, the path that led them into the system wasn't about making a bad choice. It was about having no good ones to begin with.
And that's the reality for so many. This isn't about letting people off the hook for their actions. Not at all. It's about actually understanding the circumstances that can shrink a young person's world so much that the wrong choice starts to feel like the only one they have.
So to really get what this looks like in the real world, let's follow the story of a teenager we'll call Marcus. His journey is going to be our guide through this whole complicated issue.
See, Marcus isn't just some case file number. He's a real person. He's in a reentry program. He's getting therapy. He's getting job training. But he's also dealing with the heavy stuff, like grieving his cousin who just died from an overdose. And that loss brings him right back to a time when he almost started selling pills himself because it felt like his only option for quick money. He's at a crossroads, you know? He's so much more than one mistake.
Once he got to his group home, it didn't take long for Marcus to realize he wasn't the only one with a complicated story. He was surrounded by other kids whose backgrounds are often just ignored. They're the forgotten faces behind all the stats we hear about.
For example, there was Troy. He was quiet, always kind of looking over his shoulder, and Marcus pretty quickly learned why. Turns out Troy hadn't had what you'd call a real home in 3 years. 3 years. Ever since his mom just disappeared after a drug raid, he'd been bouncing around. Shelters, friends' couches, wherever he could. Can you imagine carrying that kind of instability, that constant fear, with you every single day? For Troy, that was just normal life. And it wasn't just Troy. In that same group home, Marcus met Kelsey. Her struggles were maybe a little less obvious on the surface, but they ran just as deep.
Kelsey could be incredibly bright, really funny, but then a loud noise or even an unexpected touch could flip a switch. And it wasn't her being difficult. What was really going on was that she was fighting this silent battle against these invisible wounds from years of trauma. Her reactions, they were just echoes of a pain that had never really healed.
So being around these stories, seeing them up close every single day, it led Marcus to this huge realization. It was a complete shift in how he saw everything.
This was the big aha moment. Marcus finally got it. The system, the people running it, they weren't really interested in why kids like him or Troy or Kelsey ended up there. They were only focused on the last thing that happened, ignoring the years of homelessness or trauma, or just plain lack of options that led them to that exact spot.
And this is where it all comes together, right? Marcus's realization points to this massive flaw in how we approach juvenile justice. We have to see the person before we see the charge.
The bottom line is you just can't lump all these kids together. They are not a monolith. Treating them all as one single group under one single label, it's not just wrong. It actually does more harm.
We have to recognize that we're talking about really distinct groups of people here. Kids struggling with addiction, kids navigating serious mental health conditions, young people who are homeless, like Troy was, or others who are carrying deep trauma, like Kelsey. Each of these situations needs a totally different, specialized kind of support.
So this brings us to a much better way of doing things: trauma-informed interventions. And look, this isn't just some trendy buzzword. It's a fundamental shift in how you see the world. It's an approach that starts by recognizing that trauma literally changes how a person behaves, and then responds with actual support, not just punishment.
Okay, so once you see things this way, it really opens up a new path forward. It's a path that moves away from punishment and towards support, away from retribution and towards real rehabilitation. And the choice here is pretty stark. On one hand, we can stick with blanket punishment, this one-size-fits-all factory model that treats every kid the same and only looks at the offense. Or we can choose tailored interventions. This is more like tending to a garden, right? Where each individual person gets the specific care they need to actually heal and grow.
And this isn't just some abstract idea, you know. These are real, practical tools that are already working. We're talking about things like specialized drug courts that can offer court-supervised treatment instead of just jail time, or doing comprehensive mental health screenings the moment a kid enters the system, so you can catch issues early.
And then you have restorative justice models, which are all about bringing everyone, victims, offenders, the community, together to actually repair the harm that was done instead of just pointing fingers.
So we want to leave you with this question, because it really reframes everything, shifting from a question of blame, what's wrong with you, to one of understanding what happened to you. Well, that's the first step. It's the first step toward building a system that doesn't just punish, but actually helps young people like Marcus, Troy, and Kelsey find a genuinely better path. So, what happens when we start there?